Welcome to the Stephan Hogan podcast. I'm your host, Stephan Hogan. It is great to have you here today, and we are going to be diving into the remarkable achievements of Dr. John Delony, a leading voice in mental health and host of the number one, yes, I said it, number one ranked podcast in the health and fitness category on Apple Podcasts, hosting the Dr. John Delony Show. Sitting right next to Andrew Huberman, who I've studied and listened to a lot, and Jay Shetty's up in that top list, and some of these podcasters I've listened to over the years, and to be the number one man at the top means that you've impacted millions and millions of lives. He's a public speaker. He has 2 PhDs. He's attended Harvard's Graduate School of Education. He's written multiple books and is the best-selling author of Building a Non-Anxious Life, which is his latest book, where he provides insights into managing stress and improving emotional wellness. He is a husband, he is a father, he is a musician, which many of you may not have known or may have. That's why he moves in Nashville in the first place. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on for more enlightening content from experts like Mr. Dr. Delony, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our latest videos. You know, subscribing and all that, really, everybody says it, but it really, really means a lot. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing the podcast. And without further ado, we're going to hop into our conversation, and I'm going to get vulnerable. The inner critic is very loud. And it is for me, man. I find myself having this negative voice in my head constantly putting me down. And I was curious and just wanted to jump in there and like get a little bit of your take on that and what that's all about, and maybe some tips for how we can learn to love ourselves a little more instead of beat ourselves up.
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong musician too. My whole life. I tried to make a go of it back in the day also. So I'm with you. Moving to Nashville has been very humbling because I thought I was pretty good, and now there's a guy that will like put a broom down in a restaurant and pick up a guitar, and you're like, oh, that guy's real good too. So, here's my question back to you: whose voice is that? Because it probably didn't start as yours. So who?
Yeah, I do like therapy, and it turns out it's a scared second grader trying to protect me.
Huh. Who was picking on that second grader?
It wasn't so much a picking on, it was like a sexual thing with an older fifth grader. I was in second grade. It was on the bus. Okay. Yeah. And it just like really traumatized me.
Of course.
You know, we're still working through it.
Sure.
But to put myself out there as an example, like that one incident as a kid, I think has carried through my life, and my parents. I lived.
Did they know about it?
Yeah, they did. But I lived in an unstable household. They got divorced eventually, but I think there was that protective mechanism too. But I don't know exactly where it came from, to be honest with you.
I want to be careful how I say this, but most people who work with adults who've experienced trauma, especially when they were kids, most people understand, or most people have landed with the understanding that it's often not the thing that happened to you when you were a kid. It's that for whatever reason, when that thing happened or those things happened over that period of time, you found yourself all alone. And there was no adults that were walking with you. And even sometimes when a kid gets hurt or a kid gets abused and the parents find out, parents become enraged, parents become militant, they fight, parents start yelling and screaming, and a kid feels like, oh, I did this to my own house. I should have been quiet. I should have not said anything. And you learn at a young age, it's your job as a kid to manage the emotional reactions of the adults in your life. And no kid can carry that. And so you constantly walk through your life at second grade, third grade, fifth grade, middle school, high school, with this radar system looking for everyone in your sphere to make sure they're okay and they like you and you're not burdening them. And that weight gets so exhausting. And sexual abuse is so traumatizing, right? It's so heavy. But when it happens and you're a little kid and you're all by yourself and you find yourself responsible for managing everybody around you, you feel like that, right? Yeah. Dude, you grow up and that voice that you heard from your parents, that you heard from the counselors, that becomes the critic. You start to hear those stories in your own voice, and it just becomes paralyzing, right? It becomes so heavy. And man, if you are then a creative, if you're an artist, and I really believe in the conversations with evolutionary psychologists that there are 15-20 or so percent of a population is wired to feel deeper, to see over the hills, if you will, on behalf of the community. I'm going to feel things and see things and say things in a way that are universal for us right now. That gift as an artist is so critical. But man, you more so than the other 80% of the community, those feelings feel like a fire under your skin, right? And so it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And so to the critic, to the person who's an artist and the person who feels deeply and the person who is gifted with being able to see through things and see on the other side of hills, and that person who's wrestling with childhood trauma and parents got divorced and dad was mad that you played guitar instead of going to law school or whatever the thing is. And then you add on the economic insecurity of being an artist, right? You have the greatest month of your life followed by the worst 13 months of your life, followed by everybody saying, no, I'll call you back. And yeah, I'm working on this project. I'm going to call you. And yeah, just hang on. And then you get that little bit of a lift and then it crashes down. I want all of us to know, dude, our bodies are working perfectly. That anxiety doesn't mean we're broken. It doesn't mean something's wrong with us. It means it's working perfectly. It means our bodies are identifying threats in the world. We're all alone. We haven't dealt with that childhood trauma. We're not economically stable right now. We are, for a living, we are like, so when you're married, right, or you're dating and you see somebody, the scariest thing is looking at another person and saying, this is all of me. Do you still love me? And that's the most terrifying, vulnerable thing. And when you're an artist, you do that to the world. This is my song. Do you still love me? Right? This is my interpretation of a breakup. Do you still love me? And you're asking millions of people, and that's a lot of arrows, man. And so I think you sign up for that level of, here it comes, right? And so the question for artists is, what are the things I'm doing in my life when the light is off, when the spotlight is off, when the red light outside the studio is off? What are the things I'm doing so that I can be whole, so that when I show up in those really vulnerable, thin spaces, I don't get burned to the ground by that internal fire, right? And that has become an important thing for me. We need cops, we need hospital workers, we need attorneys, we need surgeons, we need artists, people who show up in those scary, vulnerable places. But that means everyone can't quit. We need those people. So what do we have to do when the microphone's off so that we can show up and be in those moments?
So we're talking about putting ourselves out there, and when you're creative, you're doing that for the whole world. And then for me, I remember on release days when I put out music, it was like the most depressing day of my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, dude, I remember the night I was driving, it was in Dallas, Texas, going to a book signing with my first book. My publisher is in the front passenger seat. He hands me a cell phone to the back. I answer the phone, and it's Dave Ramsey screaming into the phone, "You're number one. You hit number one." I'm cheering. I hung up the phone. I called my mom. I called my wife. And then I went and did this book signing. And then I went back to the hotel room. And there was literally nobody. And I remember thinking I could call some of my old buddies from college, and they'd be like, "Cool, man. Well, I got my kid. I got to go." And in the digging into that project, it was just so exposing. And if if you don't get number one, right? If you don't get those numbers, you're in a black hole. And when you do, the confetti falls, and then somebody's got to sweep up all the confetti, right? It's like you thought this thing was going to solve you, and it just never does. And and then the only way most artists I know, the only thing we know to do is to go write another song, go write another book, right? Because we got to get back. It's like when you're coming off of being high, the only thing I know to do is like get high again, because like that's unless you get off that train track and say, I got to do the work to be well, so that when I put a song out there, my whole being doesn't hinge on what happens next. I can't control that outcome. I will do what I got to do and write the best songs, be the best guitarist, be the best drummer, be the best author I can be. And then I'm going to let the outcomes be the outcomes, because I really can't control that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Because Vince Gill, he was saying that when you are finished with any kind of project and you release it, you have zero control of what the result is.
It's not yours anymore. That's right.
Yeah. And I always felt like that was a really refreshing piece of advice that he had given me. And I've tried to carry it, but it's definitely difficult because I seek, like many, external validation, Right. It's like
that's it. That's it right there. That's the cancer. Is that there's something out there that's going to finally tell me that I've got value.
Yeah.
And there's something out there that's going to finally make me stop feeling so crappy. And that's just, it's not true. It's not true.
When you get to a point, then it's like, okay, I did that. Or like you get back to the hotel room, your book's number one. And then it's like, okay, this doesn't feel like when if the 10-year version of you before that was to see that, it would be like, probably like dumbfounded, I would imagine.
Oh, dude, yeah, absolutely.
And then you get to the point where you're working towards this thing, and it's like this big goal, and then you get there, and it's silent, and you're like, that didn't feel the way I thought it would feel.
That's it. And I think we've got a culture that has trained us really well to pay attention to our feelings and little else. And if you've listened to any of the interviews I've done, like, we say insane things like, this marriage just ran its course. That's dumb. It's you can quit, you can stop investing in it, you can say, I don't like you, but things don't just stop. You just quit putting gas in the car, or you quit hitting the gas pedal, one of those two things. The car just doesn't stop, right? And I just don't feel like, you hear songwriters all the time, like, I just didn't feel it today. Get up and write. You know what I mean? Like, that's the exercise. And so I think we have a culture that's trained us exquisitely on be led by your feelings. And I think that's a recipe for a dumpster fire. And so what that means is I've got to get some other GPS systems in my life that are not feelings. And then I got to dig in and say, okay, well, what brings me joy? What makes me healthy? What makes me laugh? What makes me feel terrible, right? And that's another feeling, but what hurts my body, right? And let's start doing those things on a regular basis. And you're going to have days when you have a number one song, but you don't feel good. And you're going to have days when your song didn't hit very well, but your buddies, y'all go out for chips and queso that night and you're still laughing. Because who I am is not tied to that outcome. I have to disassociate those things.
When we think of identity, often it's like, if I was to say, hey, what's your identity? Someone would be like, well, I'm a banker. Or it's always like a job or what they do. But it's like, that's not your identity. That's what you do. And when we have our...
But for most of us, that's all we are, is what we do.
Yeah. And so I was going to ask you, because I wanted your take, how does one... Because I've been asking myself this question. How do I really understand what my true identity is? Now, I'm a Christian, so I have my identity as a child of God, as Him creating me, and like I'm good just being me. I'm enough. So there's that side, but at the same time, especially in the music business, people they want to be able to say, oh, this artist, they are like this, their brand's like this, their music's like this. It's almost, like they want to put them in a box.
Right.
And that's their identity. Mm-hmm. So how do you navigate the identity part? Because you're right. I think so many people do just find their identity in what they do, but there's not the happiness,
Right.
The happiness runs dry in that. So how do we find it?
So I think there's two. So I think the most common identities are, well, let me back up. We don't go to church anymore. And if we do, we go and it's very performative, right?
Yeah.
It's very performative. Or our politics are based on who we hate, not where we're all going, right? So we've cut the threads to political, like here's where we want this thing to be. We have cut our threads to our faith traditions and quote unquote religion. There's no common story that binds us anymore. We have cut our ties to our family. We all packed up and moved across the country alone to Nashville, right? Or to Los Angeles or to wherever, or to go to college or get this job. So we don't have our tribe with us anymore. And so the only thing that we have left that gives us any sort of anchor point is our job. That's it. And maybe our diet, which is why if you get online, there's like the vegan wars versus the keto wars versus the carnivore, because that's all we have. Or even, and I've tried to stoke these fires just because I think they're hilarious. I'm Gibson till the day I die, right? Ride or die Gibson. And I love poking at my Fender buddies, right? But like we get these weird side tribes because it's all we have. And so number one is we anchor everything. Think about this. Like if you have a 9-to-5 job at a traditional workplace, they talk to you about sex and interaction. They talk to you about race. They talk to you about these things that should have been talked about at your kitchen table. That should have been talked about in your Sunday school. That nobody has these conversations anymore. So we're totally unanchored. So it's either your job or it's the worst thing that ever happened to you. That's your other identity. Oh, I'm a survivor of. I'm a this. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me because as a culture, that's how we enter every room. We enter every room but first. Because like here's the worst thing that's happening to me in my life. That's how we identify with each other. And so we don't have a psychology for joy. We don't have a psychology for being anchored in any other thing. And so I think identity is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves based on what we do. And so here's how that plays out in real life. That sounds all highfalutin. If I told myself, I'm a marathoner, I'm a guy who runs marathons, there's going to come a point when being a marathoner is more important to me than going to my kid's Little League game. I got to go do a 10-mile run, so I'm going to miss the game. Or my wife says, hey, let's just go get pizza tonight. Can we just get a glass of wine as a pizza? And I'm like, well, I got to do a 14-mile because I'm a marathoner. And eventually, if you put the thing you do as your identity, it will cost you everything. It will cost you relationships. It will cost you joy. It will cost you the reason you did this in the first place. Now my identity is I'm a good steward of my body. What does that mean? That means I exercise most of the time and I get off the rails and we'll eat 7 baskets of chips and queso with my buddies when we're out. Or my wife loves pizza, dude. And is that great for me? No. Does it make me snore and not sleep as well? Yes. But did me and my wife have a great night out and laugh? Yes. I'm a good steward of my body, right? That's a different conversation. I am a good dad. Does that mean I'm perfect? No. Does that mean I do the thing so I reverse engineer it? So if so many people walk around and say, I'm an artist. What does that mean? How are you acting that out every day? Do you get up at 5 a.m. and write from 5 to 7? Then you can call yourself a writer. Right. And then from 7 to 9, do you get in there and actually do the business side of the artistry, which is the worst, but it's what we got to do. And then from 11 to 12, do you really bite the bullet and get in and do social media because that's how we have to move our stuff these days, and then you turn it off because you're not a slave to it, right? Are you an artist in practice, or is that just a thing you walk around and tell yourself in coffee shops spending money you don't have on fancy lattes because you're trying to evoke an ethos, right? So I think it's asking yourself, what's the story you're telling about yourself, and what are the things are you doing every day that backs that story up, makes it true? I can say, dude, my identity is being a great husband. All right, have I asked my wife how I can best love her? Right? Because there was a season when I called myself a good husband, and I thought being a good husband meant making a whole bunch of money and having a good six-pack abs and this thing and this thing and this thing. And none of that mattered to my wife. I was not being a good husband because the one thing my wife wanted was just me. And that was the thing that was in rare supply because you see what I'm saying? So it's the story you tell about yourself, and then what are you doing every day to back that story up? And is that bringing you peace and joy? What are the fruits of that thing at the end of the day?
So essentially, we can find identity in the different aspects of life that make us who we are, but it's important as to where we pull from.
Yeah, and not to make our identity in our goals or our accomplishments.
Okay, not to
identity
make
is a story, and it's a journey, right? It's a path. If you're a songwriter, and you know this, when you're around like songwriters, they always have a pad with them, always. And when I'm having lunch with a songwriter in Nashville, I love it when they're like, "Hold on a second," like they'll literally put their hand up and they'll start typing something real quick. I love that because the divine just came and flicked him behind the ear and gave him a line or gave him a thing, and I love just the privilege of being in that presence, right? And so they're writers. That's who they are. They're absorbers. And we also know people who call themselves songwriters, and they wrote 4 songs in high school, and they, you know what I'm saying? They don't do the work to back it up, but it's part of a path. It's not a static thing.
Essentially, a lot of people say, I want to do this. I want to be a writer, but they don't actually want it bad enough to do the things that are necessary to be able to become what they want to become because they're copying the dream, but they're unable to copy the passion. And that's not something you can steal from someone.
Yeah, and I think that's another cultural curse. We tell everybody to follow your passion. I think that's insane. I think that's nonsense. Because here's why. I become passionate about what I'm good at, and I become good at what I practice. And for 95% of us, I practice things that at some point somebody made me practice. My mom made me go to piano lessons when I was really little, and I hated it. And I kept going, and then my choir director made me learn solfege syllables and made me learn the circle of fifth, and I hated it. And then I got to high school and joined a rock band. And then I learned that language, and I loved it. But I could only be passionate about that because for 8 years I'd been doing stuff I didn't want to do. But somebody kept coaching me, and iron sharpens iron, and iron sharpens iron, and I learned a new language so that when I got in a room full of people, I was like, oh, here we go, right? Yeah. And now to this day, I'm in my 40s, and very few things bring me joy like I have my wife and my kids and my helping hurting people. Those are things I'm deeply passionate about, and I've had to practice and get good at those things over time. But other than that, dude, sitting in my basement with a guitar trying to pick out a song is one of my greatest joys on the planet, man. And dude, I don't play out very often. It's not like I'm doing it so it brings me joy. And that is my identity. One of my identities is I'm a guy who plays music. Not a musician, I'm a guy who plays music. And it can be in front of 5,000 people, it could be in front of 10,000 people, it could be just me and the stupid metronome trying to figure out a lick, right? I just love it, man. And it's agonizing and hard, but it's just getting up and doing the work and doing the work and doing the work and doing the work. And then you sit down to write. If you're someone who reads a lot and someone who writes every morning, the day will come when you sit down and you exhale and you write that thing and you know it, the universe knows it. Your chest knows it, and then you can't wait to share it with that one artist that is going to take that song that you just put on the paper and make it what it was meant to be. Or maybe it's you who can do it right. But that only comes from hard work and hard work and hard work and hard work. And then you become passionate about it. I think people are obsessed with the outcome, the success part, because they think, you said it best earlier, they think it's going to feel a certain way. It never feels that way, ever. And by the way, it's still amazing. It's still awesome, right? When you have that one song in front of a huge crowd and they're all with you, dude, I was playing a show last year. We put on this big event here. There's a couple thousand people and we were jamming. And it was one of those moments I said to myself mid-song, stand up on this high rise and absorb this, because this is a rare moment and it's pretty awesome. Like, and it was a conscious decision. I'm going to feel this because it's awesome, right? That's all. That's fantastic. That comes from 30 something years of work, right? And I'm passionate about it, but dude, if you're just like passionate about getting famous, you have a miserable life, man. Miserable life.
And I feel like so many people now just want to be famous for a living. They want to be an influencer. Yeah. And it's so weird to me. But I wanted to say something about myself, because I think if I just talk about the struggles I go through and things, if I have the problem, someone else has it. That's my view. So back to talking about music, and you sitting in your basement and just finding joy in playing. If it's you by yourself or you playing in Nissan Stadium. So I have developed a weird relationship with music. I started playing guitar when I was 5. And I did it because my dad did it. I grew up and I had guitar lessons and I did jazz band in high school. And I mean, I did AP music and I studied music in college and came here because songwriting and all that. But I also did it in church and made money doing it. And there was a point where this thing that I've been working on my whole life since I was a little kid, and I had this vision of like, I'm going to do this for a living. Well, that dream has not played out, and I'm not trying to force it to play out either. But what happened, and this is weird, and I'm looking forward to your take on it, is that I developed a relationship with a guitar to where I didn't want to pick it up anymore because it represented failure. That I failed at my dream, versus the love that I once had as the little kid that set out to play guitar, not to make money, not to get famous, not to have some big accomplishment or win an award, but just because of the love. And I've always been curious how I get back to the love of music for the sake of that pure joy I once had.
How honest do you want me to be?
100% honest.
All right. I think 3 things are at play here. The first thing is, and this isn't on you, this is on all of us. As a culture, we are terrible at grieving. We are so fast to move on to the next thing. And grief is just the gap between what I wanted, what should have happened, and what actually happened. And so grief is, we got married and I thought you would never cheat on me, and you did. Grief is, I love my dad. Oh my gosh, my dad's got cancer, right? It's the gap between what we want to be true and reality. And most of us, our entire culture is built on passing that gap. The catch is, neurologically, your body sits there and will spin and spin and spin because it knows you cannot move forward without sitting in that black hole, in that hole of sadness. I thought this. Most musicians, the same as athletes, spend a lot of time with athletes who transition out of their athletic careers. Most athletes and musicians, especially in someone like, as you just described it, music was the one way they got their mom or their dad to say good job. It was their one way that they weren't great at music. I mean, they weren't great at grades. They weren't great at getting the trash taken out. They weren't the handsomest guy, but their pastor would pat them on the back and say, you are really great at, or that old lady would stop them on the way out of church.
That's me,
and
man.
Say,
that's 100%
you're amazing.
Me.
So when music is tied up into connection, or being an athlete is tied up into connection, because that was the only avenue I had in an angry house to get my dad to go, hey, good job on that. Or to get my mom to go, hey, you crushed that. That was excellent. And so now it's about how do I reestablish, how do I unhook music from relationship? And I'm going to have to grieve the crap out of the fact that dad should have loved you for more than your ability to play guitar. And that's all he had. And that's the only tool he had. He's just a regular guy, just trying to do the best he could with what he had. And how do I get a path back to dad that is not hitched to or duct taped together with this guitar? I need to take the pressure off playing. Because if the more pressure, the heavier it gets, and the heavier it gets, the more of a burden it is, and it loses its joy, right? That's how, if you go watch the Time Jumpers on Monday night over there and see Vince play, Gil play, he's an unhitched man. There's a guy sitting on a chair that is playing because that dude loves playing, right? And it is a joy that is palpable throughout the audience. And I like going to sit all by myself, or maybe I'll take one friend and there's no talking. And for 4 hours, they play old country standards. And it is they don't need the money. They don't need people to go, oh my gosh, look how good they are. There's no pressure on this other than to play, right? Just in literally the word, we're just playing. We're having a good time. And so if I can unhook relationship from it, if I can unhook, I need this because this is my path to the spotlight. If I can unhook that, if I can begin to, and what that means is unhook, it's not the music. It's me calling my dad and saying, hey, let's just go get coffee. Or once a week, can we just talk on the phone at 4:30 on a Thursday? What? Just, I miss you, Dad. Like, I moved across the country. We don't talk very much and you're getting old. Could we just talk like once a week? Okay. What about? I don't know. You see what I'm saying? And so I'm going to regroove another path towards these relationships, towards our parents, towards community, whoever that may be. And for those of us whose parents have passed away, then I'm going to find a group of guys that may or may not be in the music industry, and we're just going to get together and talk about whatever. And I'm going to develop relationships unattached to music, unattached to sports, unattached to the industry, so that when I pick that guitar up, me and that guitar and God can reconvene, right? And we can begin to make magic again. And go back to that magic word, play. I have an 8-year-old little girl, dude. She still gets on the floor and plays. And it's finding that. And I think when you see a musician who has, that's why I love musicians who've practiced. Because when you've practiced a lot, and I was an old punk rock kid, an old metalhead. I love watching those guys who you could tell. I remember when Dimebag from Pantera, when he came out with a column in Guitar World, I was kind of heartbroken for a bit because I was like, "Oh, you actually know how to play? Like you know the keys and you know like EGBDF. Like I just thought y'all like plugged in and partied." But then watching him, like, "Oh, you're a musician." Then seeing, oh, you've practiced so much that you can get on stage in front of 15,000 people and absolutely cut loose because this is a part of it. Dude, it's play. It's play. But you've done all the work so that you can just let it rip. And that is it's unhooked, right? It's unattached. And I just think it's amazing.
Yeah. So what about...
And that goes back, can I say this? Yeah. For a musician who's struggling with anxiety, here's where that gets really brass tacks. Don't ever, ever, ever borrow money. Right? If you come out of music school and you owe $110,000 in student loans, you can't enjoy music because you can't breathe. If you go move to Nashville and you buy a big F-150 and you get a nice apartment and you have put so much weight into that guitar case that the guitar case can't possibly carry the weight you just put on it. And so every time you pick it up, there's so much pressure. Every time you pick up a pen, the weight of that pen is a mortgage, right? It's a car payment. So if you get in your head, I'm never going to owe anybody money, ever. Then I'm gonna figure out how to live beneath my means, however low those means are, or I have to do something very unsexy, like throw boxes at Walmart for $17 an hour between 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. I'm going to do those things so that my relationship with the guitar, with the pen, when I'm quote unquote working on my craft, is just that. It's unhooking all these other things that I've attached to it.
That's one of the best things that's been said on this podcast to date, because we, like how you put the analogy of the truck and the apartment in the Gulch, and then all of a sudden even if you had a publishing deal, let's say, and you're writing songs or whatever it may be, and you're making $25,000 off a draw, the weight of you having to pay your bills and knowing that you may not ever get a cut and that your draw is recoupable and all of the things that go into that, man, the pressure kills your ability to even be creative in the first place, because then you're just living in stress. It's like your sympathetic nervous system versus your parasympathetic nervous system.
Well, and when your body goes to fight or flight, when your body knows, if I don't crank out one more song, they're going to take my car and they're going to take my apartment. When your body goes to fight or flight, your ability to be creative is offline. Your ability to think critically is offline. Your body is simply trying to survive, period. That's neurochemistry, right? And so the more I can stay in, now, like the more I can have peace so that I can be in touch with this bigger stream of energy that I'm trying to tap into, right? These big narratives that have been through all of human history, like love and heartbreak and laughter and fun. Like I have to tap into those, and I can't when I'm trying to take a piece of it and use that to pay my bills, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you don't have to work real hard, but it's showing up. It's like showing up to track practice or cross-country practice with a whole bunch of rocks in your pocket. Man, you can't possibly get the workout in you need to do, or you can, but your knees are going to blow out because it can't carry that extra weight. And so make one of those principles. I will never, ever borrow money. I will never pull from my draw unless I'm playing on house money, right? If I'm on draw number 2, then I'll start taking some of your money because I got a song in the can, right? So-and-so's going to cut this song. And or I'm actually got a gig playing out on tour with somebody. I'm a backup acoustic player in the back corner behind the bass player, but I'm going to get a nightly draw, and now I'll start spending some of that money. Make some of those core principles before you get in the arena, and man, you're going to have a lot more peace, but you're going to be able to write from a much freer place.
I'm sure you are aware of Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you can explain it better than I can, but essentially creativity is at the top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. So in order to be creative, you have to have all these basic human needs met. And I feel like a lot of people, myself included, have that pyramid flipped completely upside down. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, I have to be creative in order to have food and shelter, etc.
Right. I think there's an important place, though, in like Maslow's hierarchy. Like, if you don't have safety, I think there's an important place to write out, to be creative out of that fear and out of that desperation. That's what connects you to an audience, right? That's why early Eminem is easier to connect to than older Eminem, because older Eminem has $150 million, right? Early Eminem is just trying to find a place to sleep because mom's struggling with addiction. That message resonates, and when you're writing from that place of scarcity, it's awesome. But most of us have that scarcity in our lives already, and they don't need to pile on with, well, I got to get I got to go get a D28 Martin because I want to look cool in the writing session. Bro, take whatever guitar you got, because it's when you start strumming it that they all go, all right, that guy knows what he's doing. And by the way, if you have a $700 guitar and an old Alvarez and you strum it and you sound good and your song's rich, that buys you more cred, right? Because then somebody will say, hey, play this Gibson. It's going to sound like it's got a much flatter tone. You're going to love it. Or play my high-end Taylor. It's going to sing for you. And so it's understanding that. I used to think that you had to have a bunch of, when I started, being on YouTube and podcasts and everything, I started my show, I thought I had to wear these certain, now I've got $7 black t-shirts, and it's become a catch, right? Who would have thought that? I thought you had to wear this and this and get all this. Bro, just get a thing that's yours that you feel comfortable in so you can show up and do your job, right?
Yeah.
But I think I don't want creatives to think I can't do creative work until I get to the top of this pyramid, but set yourself up that when you have seasons of heartbreak and you have seasons of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my rent this month, write out of those, but don't add any extra. Don't just set your house on fire so you can get some tragedy so you can write out of that. Your brain knows the difference, right? But you're going to connect to the world on those bottom rungs as you work your way up.
100%. And I think for people that are considering moving to town, to offload as much expenses as possible before you get here is the best thing
there'll be
you can
enough
do.
stress to ride out of, man. There'll be plenty of drama to ride out of.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you don't need the latest iPhone, as my friend would put it. You don't need a fancy car or any of that. Like, expect to lower your expenses just because of the fact that there's not a lot of money in music. Yeah. And I think that's well said, the way that you put that.
Well, hey, can we say what you just said also? I think it's important. I think there is a whole generation, maybe 33-year-olds and younger, 35-year-olds and younger. Dude, those houses in Brentwood used to be built with songwriter money, right? And I think very similar to, there used to be people that all they did was raise extraordinary horses to pull carriages. And then Henry Ford rolled out the Model T, and it just ended the horse farm, right? And so I think if you're a younger person and you had it set, like, I am a great songwriter, I'm so good at this, and I can take all these cosmic truths and put them in 3 lines, and I'm the best at pre-chorus. I don't even know how to change keys at the end. You just have to know that doesn't buy Brentwood homes anymore, because everything's streamed. There's just no money in it anymore. And you either have to learn a couple of other crafts, or you also have to make peace with, I'm going to teach music too, or you have to understand the fuller picture. And some of that is grief. I've got to grieve the fact that I was on a path. Or my buddies who are 45, they tasted songwriting 20 years ago. They know, like, oh, dude, I was one of 4 co-writes on a song that got picked up by a B-level country artist. And dude, it paid for my car, right? It was good money back then.
Yeah.
And it's just not there anymore. And so let's grieve it. Let's don't pretend it never happened. Let's be real sad about it. And then let's be honest and sober about, okay, what comes next for us?
Part of what I talk about a lot on this podcast is the realities of Nashville versus the dream that you have when you're a kid growing up in a small town and you watched the show Nashville, right. And you think like, oh, I'm going to move to Nashville, and it's going to be like X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to be, I'm going to get that check off of that song. And so that just doesn't happen like it used to. And it's a bummer, but it's true. And I like your horse analogy with Henry Ford. It just is how it is. And I think it's important to learn the business side as well as the music side, like you were saying, because you have to figure out a way to make money outside of music most of the time. I was wondering, for you in business, when did you and how did you make a step from being this punk rock guitar player to someone that really understood business and money?
I'm going to be as honest as I can. I think like being a punk rock kid, growing up in that world, I was inundated. So the joke was, my dad was a homicide detective, and then halfway through my childhood, he quit and became a minister at a really large church in Houston. And so Fridays and Saturdays, Friday nights my band would be playing somewhere. Saturday nights I'd be going to some punk club downtown, and then Sundays I'd be in Sunday school, right? And so it was this real toggle. And what I loved about it was I was exposed to a whole bunch of different ways of thinking. And it wasn't just exposure in my bedroom. I got to see these punk rock shows where everyone was moshing and someone would fall down and the whole audience would stop to pick somebody up. And the number of punk rock singers who were screaming their lungs out and running around, who would stop a show and say, turn the lights on. There's 2 kids down here on the floor. Everybody stop. We're going to take care of these kids. Like, so I got to see it in real time, what community and care and compassion look like. And then I grew up with a pretty amazing church family growing up. So I got to see what compassion and love look like. And so learning how to look at a situation from a bunch of different perspectives was important. And then I got a job at a university really young. I was a high school teacher, and then because I had to pay the bills, and then I got a job at a university. And I'll never forget, they were building a residence hall, and housing reported to me, of all things. Dude, I didn't know what I was doing. And the president asked me to get a performa for a residence hall. I didn't know what performa meant. Oh, he wanted an amortization schedule. Didn't know what that word meant. So I had to go ask these things. Then I turned in this performa, like how much it's going to cost to build this building. Dude, I turned it in on a Word document. And as long as I live, I'll never forget the guy. I was probably 27, maybe 28. He looked at me, and it was a whole room full of people. And it was like a $30 million project. And he goes, "What is this?" And I just remember being so embarrassed in that room. I was wearing a tie. And here's what I did. I've never had an ego about this kind of stuff. I love learning things I don't know. So I hired a fourth-year accounting student, an undergraduate, to come in my office. He snuck in on Wednesday afternoons at 4 p.m. I still remember, and he taught me how to use Excel. I didn't know how to do it. And he helped me be really good at Excel. And then I developed a reputation. I hate numbers. I hate dealing with the business side. But if I wanted the good stuff, which was to sit with hurting people, I also had to learn how to do the other part of the job. When I was a graduate school professor, I would teach counseling students, like future counselors. They love talking with people. Dude, part of the job is writing your notes up at the end of the day. It's not fun. Nobody wants to do that, but that's part of the job. Part of the job is learning what happens when someone files on your license and you're going to get sued. You got to learn how to do that. And so similar, I developed a reputation for being really good with budgets, but it became from a place of humility. I had to hire somebody to teach me how to do a thing I didn't know how to do, and I had to practice it. I hated it, but then I got pretty good at it. And so similar, like writing a song, learning, the 145, the Nashville stuff, or just the GCD, the old school, right? And knowing that there's only one sharp in the key of G, and like learning all those things is cool. And you have to learn how derivatives work, and you have to learn how do you actually get paid? And when somebody offers you money, is that yours, or is that their way of putting a hook in your skin so that you have to pay it back over the next 7 years? And so you have a responsibility to learn the whole thing. And here's what I'll tell you. None of it's wasted. I'm only doing the job I'm doing right now because I had 15 years of running around on a stage, whether as a musician or doing theater in college. Being able to be up on stage and to communicate with an audience paid dividends when I was a dean of students at Belmont, when I was a dean of students of a law school in Texas, and now as a public speaker. I travel all over the country to speak. Going to grad school taught me about mental health stuff. Sitting with hurting people taught me about that so that I could take these calls on my show. So nothing is wasted. One of the most common things I hear in business now is, can you just send this to me shorter? Like, people write these big, long emails, and CEOs don't have time to read that. They get 800 emails a day. You know who the best people in the world at being concise and getting their message across? Songwriters. So if there's a skill that you could take from songwriting to go transition and make a whole bunch of money, go to any industry. And if you can be concise and clear about what you're trying to say, dude, it's songwriters, man. You have a gift that you have honed over time. It's just going to be the application of it's going to be different. And make sure you always have a group of men and women that you're playing music with, because that's why you did it in the first place, man. It's so fun. It's so good for you.
What's your favorite part of being able to help when it comes to the work that you do? And I think that even for me in this podcast is about helping people, like we talked about before it started recording. And for you, you're helping people. Is that the reward, or is there a level that's deeper than that for you?
That nagging voice that's always asking, are you worth being loved, is the one that always ran me into burning buildings, right? Or that I went into an active shooter situation at a school once, like that voice, like, are you enough? Are you enough? And so that's quieter now. It's much quieter. I've been to a lot of therapy here in Nashville and back in Texas. And so, but it would be dishonest to say that's not still part of it, right? Are you doing your part? And I think all of us could stand to listen to that voice a little bit more. So that's there. Here's the bigger thing.
I have a question about that too.
Yeah.
Would you call that a negative inner core belief that you have about yourself?
It was when I let it drive me. Or let me say this. When I put it in the driver's seat, it was unhealthy. When I give it a seat in the back seat, I think it's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that everybody has a negative inner core belief about themselves?
It's a great question, man.
Because we're always driven by like something, you know, like people that are successful, a lot of times it's because of their
No, I'm going to say
childhood.
no. I'm going to say no. My wife is a good example. She has self-doubts and she's got negative self-talk and things like that. But she was a elementary school professor, and then she got her PhD and was a college professor, and now she coaches women and she's an author. She doesn't operate from the same central core that I do. She operates actually from a different place. She's one of the most extraordinary teachers I've ever met. Whether you put her in front of college students and grad students or first graders, she's just able to walk in and connect. And she brings a level of stability and sturdiness and peace to a room. And it's all like it felt arrogant at first because she operates from a place of, I know I'm one of the best that's able to do this, and this is what I'm here for on this planet, and so I'm going to go do this with excellence. Mine comes from a different place. The outcome might be the exact same. So no, I don't think so. I think it's people who are more often than not those who have suffered some sort of trauma or who have survived some sort of thing, or those people who just feel the world a little more deeply, a little more powerfully. I think those of us in that camp, sounds like you and I are in a very similar camp, tend to internalize negative dialogue. Other people's voices become our own voice. And I think our mission is not to snuff that voice out, because that voice sometimes is right? There is sometimes I'm lazy, I phone it in. And I need an inner critic, an inner coach saying, hey, you didn't do your best on that. But I also have to know when that inner critic is just moving the finish line no matter what, right? So yeah. I got number one in the Wall Street Journal, and the very first inner critic voice was like, ooh, Wall Street Journal. It wouldn't have been cool if you got the New York Times, right? And so it's like, it always just moves, right? And the Wall Street Journal for books, it's number count. Who sold the most books? The Wall Street Journal is a popularity contest, right? They get in a room and they're like, they vote on it. So even then, it didn't matter, right? It's just this false prestige, but that's the inner critic, and I have to know, all right, I hear you, and you don't get a vote on this one. And so there was years I talked to that inner critic. Now, it's more in the back. So, but it is, I have this inner drive, like I feel like I owe the world, and that's just arrogance and, childhood stuff. The bigger picture is this. The healthier and more honest picture is this. I thought when I started this job, when I left higher ed completely, I was the chief student affairs officer at Belmont, and it's why I moved to Nashville in the first place. I love the school. I love everything about it. It's amazing. And I left to come do this, to start writing and start podcasting and speaking and all that. I thought people were tuning into the show because the show took off real fast, and I thought they were tuning in because they thought I was the smartest man, and I thought I had my big fancy PhDs, and everyone was impressed with my answers. And about 6 months in, we all realized that is not the case. People were tuning in was they were watching an interaction. They had never seen somebody say out loud, I just cheated on my husband and I don't know what to do. And they had never seen somebody be compassionate and yet honest with that person at the same time. Or they'd never seen somebody in real life say, I think I want to die by suicide. And they've never seen somebody be compassionate with that person and say, well, pull up a seat, man. Here's some nachos. Let's figure this out. And so what the show has become over the last few years, and I think my role in helping people, is less about the answers. I think most people who call in know what I'm going to say. It is, how can I provide a model for what a healthy interaction looks like? What does vulnerability look like? What does somebody who's an expert who says, I don't know, I have to call one of my buddies because I don't know the answer to that. What does that type of vulnerability look like? And what is compassion plus accountability? I think we have a culture that on one side is it's all compassion. It's the only thing that matters. Whatever you feel is whatever you feel. The other side is all accountability, right? It's if you have a feeling, it's because you're a wimp. Suck it up, grind it, crush it. Good. It's all there is. And I think both of those are insane. I think there's a middle ground, right? Like let's feel it, and then let's go do the next right thing, and I'm right here with you. And I just don't think that picture exists in our culture. And so when it comes down to helping people, I think it's the model. I've apologized on my show before. I've gotten mad and acted like an infant before, and I always apologize, right? I pulled down a couple of shows because I didn't do a good job. I got caught up in the story. I got caught up getting frustrated with a caller, and I didn't do a good job. And so I think it's important for me to say I'm sorry publicly too, and just show here's what this looks like in real life.
what people are hungry for is more authenticity.
Right.
Just
but
people.
I
to
think
be
they want
open
authenticity with accountability, right?
and with accountability. Yeah, dive into that. I mean, you just talked about it a little bit, but like it could look different for everybody. Authenticity with accountability. What's the accountability part look like?
So like in counseling for the last 150 years, the way you're trained is you're never allowed, it's impartiality, right? So if you have a couple and the couple's sitting there and he's just a jerk, a total jerk. And as a therapist, you're trained to continue to ask, well, to the spouse, like, well, how are you feeling about what he just said? How are you feeling about that? And now, over the last 10 or 15 years, led by Terrence Real and others, it's just this common sense, like, that's cruel. Somebody needs to tell him, stop saying that, right? It's madness. Quit doing that. And so I think we've had this YOLO that has morphed into authenticity. And authenticity, like, this is just me, man. Okay, that's cool, but that's also you're a jerk. Stop, right? Or that's just me, man. Okay, if you're struggling with addiction, we're not going to celebrate that with you. When you're ready, we're going to all be here and we're going to love you, and you're always going to have a room in my house to crash. But we want you to know that we love you and we see how your world's spinning out from underneath you, right? So it is authenticity with an attempt to go do best, be a good steward of you and your community and your tribe. And so it's both and now. And I think that we're just reaching a place where it's madness to not call out some of this stuff and really seek to be better on the back end, right?
Yeah. I heard a quote by Gandhi or a story where this lady brought her son to Gandhi and was like, can you get him to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi was like, come back in 3 days. And she came back with her son. And she's like, why did we have to wait 3 days? And he's like, 3 days ago, I was eating sugar. And I feel like he held himself accountable in that moment. And that's something that I'm reading a book by John Maxwell right now. And it's about communication and leadership. And he was talking about the importance of, if you're going to ask somebody else to do something, you have to do it yourself.
That's exactly right. And hey, we don't like that in our culture. And we have to be okay with that. I used to go to a Bible study back in the day. It was at the university I was working. There was about 10 of us. And the general counsel, it was in his office, the lawyer for the college. And every Monday morning at 6:15 in the morning, he would ask everybody, go around the room, what's one thing you did for your spouse last night or this past week? And dude, there were many a week that Sunday night I did something nice for my wife, knowing I was going to get asked that question. And that sounds bad on its face, right? But here's the thing. I was learning how to be a husband. I didn't know how. My dad and my mom had a different kind of marriage, and so their picture was different. And so was that like the most altruistic reason to do something nice? No. But at the end of the day, did my wife feel loved? Yes. Did I learn and practice under the being held accountable by a group of men that I signed up to join to be a better husband? Yes. Now, 20 years later, is my marriage pretty good? Yes. Right? And so we have to be okay with those weird windows when this is uncomfortable. It goes back to writing. Go write every day, every single day. And it sounds like the oldest trite, like cliche in the book, but from 7 to 9 a.m., turn off everything you have and just write. And you're going to look up in 2 years and you're going to have a bunch of songs and a bunch of thoughts and a bunch of much clearer thinking. You're going to be a better writer. And then a song is going to come, right? Or some pieces of a song are going to come, and then you can really get to work on it. But just show up and be okay with that part. We want it to be all like, I don't know, Garth Brooks went in a dark, smoky room and he came out with this new song and because he had this moment. It's just not how it works. It's just not how it works. It's fiction. And so let's just shine some light on the fiction. Let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. I know as we wrap up, I got a couple last questions for you. I have a son. He's 16 months old. And one of the things that you said in this interview, well, a bunch of stuff is like, we don't do this good as a society, or this is something that we're not good at. There's a pressure as a father, I think, for all parents, mothers and dads, to do the right thing. And one of the things that I think about is the idea of like passing on generational, some would call them generational curses.
Yeah.
But one of the things that has kind of been a pillar of that whole curse thing, there's been addiction, and there's been like money's been a big issue, like poverty mindset and stuff like that. And you were talking about hiring someone or an undergrad to help you with accounting. And there's these things that are never going to be taught in school. But for me as a first-time parent, is there anything that you would suggest, because I have a lot of friends that are out there on the road and stuff, and they have little kids at home. And it's like we're asking ourselves these questions, like, what do we do to be the best us other than love them unconditionally?
Right.
But in terms of instilling something outside of the things that we already know, love them, care for them, what is something that you would suggest is really important to instill in a child from the very early stages of life, even if you haven't, quote unquote, broken that generational curse yet?
All right, I'm going to rattle them off, okay? Love your son's mom maniacally, insanely, and let him see that he is not the most important thing in that household. In our modern world, we've made our kids the center of our homes. Where do you want to eat? What do you want to have? What do you want to do? Do you want to play baseball? Do you want to do this? Do you want to go on vacation? Where do you want to vacation? Kids cannot carry that weight. And kids complain and whine because they're kids, and that's okay. But they need to know every day dad walks in and the first thing he does is hugs mom. They need to know that mom and dad decide where we eat, and then mom and dad give me a choice of chicken or a burger, right? I get I get some choice because they're going to teach me how to make choices, but it's a curated choice, right? Teaching the kid that mom is the most important thing in the world. The second thing is get a group of men who have middle schoolers and high schoolers who are ahead of you, not too far away. Because if you get too far away, like everybody's kids are grown up, they're like, oh, you'll be fine. And it's like, it doesn't feel fine right now, man. I need you like tethered back here for a bit, right? So it's finding some guys that are 5 to 10 years ahead of you who say, they basically are a light in the when the monitor guy, the smoke on the stage, and he'll just click his light at you. It's that. That's what it's just a tiny little light in the darkness when you and your wife aren't talking because y'all haven't slept in 4 days and your sex life is ruined. You have no money and you have this kid that's just going, bah, bah, bah. And you look up and one of those guys just goes, and okay, the monitor guy's watching, right? It's like, it's letting you know it's going to be okay.
My life.
And so, well, so here's the deal. Find somebody like me who's got an 8-year-old. I'm close enough to remember when I had a 16-month-old, but I'm also differentiated enough that my heart rate doesn't beat out of my chest every time I think about those days. In my house, those days were really rough, man. They were tough. And so get a group of men in your life that you meet with regularly, that you can tell the truth to, that you can say, my wife's driving me crazy. And they're not going to be like, ooh, or, hey, well, I got a girl you should meet, who aren't going to do any of that nonsense, but who will hear you and go, all right, what's the next right move? What's the next thing you're going to do to show her that you love her, or to ask, how can I love you right now, even though things are chaotic? And then the third thing is treat becoming a dad like you would treat it if a big country act said, hey, we're going on the road in 2 months, and here's a list of 38 songs I need you to learn. You're going to be my guitarist. You would dedicate everything to that. Here's an example in my life, okay? This year at New Year's, every New Year's, me and my wife get together for what we call like our annual planning thing. How did we do? We had some money goals. We had some marriage goals. And we give each other permission. What kind of dad was I this past year? Like overall, what kind of dad was I? And my wife will say, like, okay, what kind of mom? How are you experiencing me in the house? You're a little bit angry. You're a little bit more anxious. You're so present this past year, right? So we give each other permission to speak up. And then we go over the money stuff. And then I take another half day or full day just with me. What kind of guy are you becoming, right? Going back to the identity. I'm a guy who wants to be a good dad and a good husband. Am I doing the things in my life day to day that's gonna backfill that identity, make it so? And this is the first year I had a little voice that popped up in my head. I don't know whose voice it was, but it was that, hey, what are the 2 most important things to you in the world? And of course, I gave the same cheesy answer everybody in Nashville would give, which is my faith and my wife and kids, right? My family. And then the first time in my life, this other little voice asked, how much money have you spent on learning about mental health stuff over the past 10 years? And just back of the napkin math, when I was like a master's degree and a PhD and my time I spent at Harvard, like doing all these things, probably $150,000, $175,000. And then it was, how much have you spent on learning about your faith and learning about your wife? And the answer was zero. And so I sat in that and I grieved it a little bit. I was like, dude, I've been a walking contradiction. I tell everybody, including myself, this my faith in my kids, my faith in my kids. And 100% of my books, my energy is spent on work, on learning my craft. And so I called a buddy who was the chair of the theology department over at Lipscomb. He had just quit. And he was going to do some other things. He'd resigned to go start a business. So I called him and hired him. For one semester, I want you to teach me, we're going to do a faith 101. I know how to pull apart everybody's faith, but I have a 14-year-old little boy who stares at me, and I need to be able to explain to him, here's what dad believes and why. And I said, I need to start over. So I hired him. We still do. We meet every Friday for the rest until July. And then I asked my wife, I said, will you make me a syllabus of you? I don't know the podcast you're listening to. I don't know the 15 songs that move you anymore. I don't even know what books you're reading. And she came back, and it was pretty vulnerable. She said, because about a month went by, and I was like, hey, you never sent me that syllabus. And she said, dude, this is the most, she goes, I wish you'd asked me to do some weird thing. Like this is super vulnerable, because what if I give you these books and this poetry and these songs and you don't like me? And it was this very vulnerable moment. I was like, no, I may think your books are dumb, but I'll always love you, right? So she sent me a syllabus. And so for the year 2024, I'm getting a master's degree in my wife. And this isn't about sex. It's not about intimacy. It's about, I don't know the things in her head and heart and mind anymore, just because we've been living, we're both busy, we're both running around, we got kids, I got work, she's got work. And so it's a way that we're going to reconnect. And dude, I'm not going to like most of the books. I know that. And I'm not going to like most of the podcasts. But I'm going to learn about her, right? Mm. And so I would challenge everybody. If you're looking at this 16-month-old, bro, I did not know that kids poop 400 times a day. I thought they went once like regular people. They don't. Yeah. They dump all the time. I didn't know that. And that's because I didn't take the time to learn. So I'm going to ask people the same as you would a 14-city run that you were about to make and you had to learn 33 songs. Invest in your kid, learn that stuff. Listen to podcasts, get on, ask older men, ask older women, have a group of your buddies' wives who you can text all three of them at the same time and just be like, weird rash, somebody help, right? Or how many times is a kid how hot is the bottle supposed to be, or whatever, right? My kid's 2.5 and he still won't pee like in a potty. Is this normal? Have somebody that you can begin to learn. Get a series of coaches that will walk alongside you and make it a priority. And then the last thing I'll tell all dads, hug your sons. Hug your sons, hug your sons. Kiss your sons on the face. Put your hands on their face. There's some nervous system stuff there. Don't get all nerdy. Most men don't hug their sons. Kiss your sons on the face. Touch your kids on the face, on the back of the neck. It calms their nervous system. It gives their bodies peace. And over time, they will learn that guy is a safe place. We all knew, like, don't go around dad after this time because it's just dad. I want to change that. I want my son, when things get stressful, to know dad's home base. I can go talk to that guy. And that doesn't mean I'm not tough. That doesn't mean I can't fight. That doesn't mean I don't know how to use gun, whatever nonsense masculine thing you want to put out there. But I want my son to always know, my daughter to know, dad's safe. When anything goes sideways in my life from here on out, I can go to that guy. And so hug your sons, kiss your sons, put your hands on your son's face. Like, let their bodies feel safe inside yours.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and wisdom.
You got it, brother. Awesome. Thanks for your hospitality, man. Come by and see me sometime in Franklin. We can hang.
Yeah, I'd love to. And then for people that are listening to this that maybe don't know or follow you on social media, can you just throw it out there so everybody can go over and follow you, and also where they can get the book? Yeah,
man. You can follow me at John Delony on the internets. That's kind of all over the place. And the show, anywhere you get YouTube or podcast, the Dr. John Delony Show. And then my books, you can get them at Target, Amazon, and johndelony.com. You can get them anywhere.
And you read your own. You read the Audible.
Yeah. And I think you can even get the audiobook for free on Spotify. And so you can get it everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, man. And keep rocking those $7 shirts, and I'll keep rocking mine from Walmart.
I know, but we can't talk about the part because I do way overspend. I got way too many guitars. And so you do need to keep buying guitars. I'll just say that to the audience. It does make you feel better.
They'll only go up in value. They'll only go up.
Oh, yeah. That's the stupidest lie we tell ourselves. No, it's investment, man. It's investment. It's so dumb.
Yeah,
so dumb. All right, brother. Take care, man. Appreciate you, Stephan.
Take it easy. See you, John.
All right, bye.
And that is a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you, John, for joining. Please, again, hit subscribe, like, share, comment. Anything will help because it drives up that algorithm. If you enjoyed this, you'll probably like the Vince Gill interview that I did that we have mentioned in this episode. And you can just click that up there on your right-hand side of the screen and watch it now. Have a great week. Stay safe out there. Peace.